welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, very, very much appreciated. Always nice to do a rum episode of the show every now and again. Right, so on today's episode of the show, you're probably wondering just what is actually going on. Why is there a title page with just 4 question marks, and what's all this kind of secrecy, cloak and dagger kind of stuff? What the hell is actually going on? I didn't want to kind of give the game away before I actually introduced what it is I am actually doing on today's episode of the show. And yeah, I suppose I could have foregone a title page and I could have just popped up, straight away, which probably would have been a bit weird because it goes against convention, got to have a title page, it's just the way things are done. Anyway, right, so cast your minds back to around about this time of the year 3 years ago, long before the COVID and the shenanigans in number 10 and all this upheaval. We're going to kind of look back at 2019 and go, oh, what a great year it was, Anyway, no. Cast your minds back to about this time in 2019, and we were about to have Nottingham's first whisky festival. And as you may recall, I did a bottling for my employer, Gauntleys of Nottingham, and it was well received. It went down pretty well, and I thought, as this year we are having a Nottingham Whisky Festival again, I would do the same again. So, reaching down, here it is. This is what I will be reviewing today. Sort of. Right. Okay, so last time you may recall that it was a Bunnahabhain. It was a half cask of Bunnahabhain, no, it wasn't a half cask of Bunnahabhain at all, was it? No, this is a bloody Bunnahabhain I'm doing today. It was a half cask of Kalila. Sorry. So I decided when I reviewed it to sort of review it against its peers, so to speak. It seemed the most sensible thing to do, to see how it stood up to other bottlings of a similar type of age, and I think it stood up really well. And a lot of people that customers that tasted it, were very impressed by it and really liked it. And some people said it was the best Kalila they'd ever tasted, and I took that with a small pinch of salt, should we say, because I've tasted some very, very impressive Kalila. Anyway, this time I thought I would do something a little bit different, hence why the question marks. Now, this year I decided to partner up, for want of a better word, with the Sipping Shed. Couple of reasons why. The guy that owns the Sipping Shed, or that runs the Sipping Shed, Dan Hipson, is a lovely guy, really nice guy, great guy to do business with, and he has some good casks. His range, although fairly small, is quality wise very, very impressive, and I know that he doesn't mind bottling split casks. In fact, he's done sort of a couple in the past. In fact, bottled an Altmore, which you may well recall, has actually got 3 different bottlings out of the cask, so bottled it in thirds. Must get round to reviewing that sometime, certainly batch 2 and 3 anyway. And so I knew he would be, open to the idea of bottling half a cask, and it all then just boiled down to whether he had something that was ready for bottling, and that I thought would be a good enough quality to actually put my name on the bottle. Because if I'm going to put my name on the bottle, to be honest with you, it's got to sort of, it's got standard to live up to, hasn't it, I suppose. And so Dan kindly sent me 4 different samples for me to have a look at, and I thought it might be a nice idea for this week's episode of the show is to show these samples to you and just kind of like give you a bit of an insight into why I chose what I chose at the end of the day. I'm sure Dan basically won't mind because none of the 4 samples were dreadful at all, but I just thought it might be, you know, just interesting, so you kind of like, you know, get inside my head to a certain extent, which is probably a bit scary, to be bluntly honest with you, because sometimes I don't want to be inside my own head. But anyway, yeah, so it's going to be relatively short because there's only 4 samples. They're all cast strength, so my butt is full. Yeah, that joke, I never tire of that joke, to be bluntly honest with you. It's going to go on forever and a day, isn't it? Anyway, so let's just take a look at the samples that I was saying. Right, okay, so first sample we're going to look at today is from Loch Lomond. This is a Glen Shiel. Now you may well recall that this is actually the second half of cask, first fill bourbon cask 800 942, which Dan has already released, and I believe I have reviewed on an earlier episode of the show. No idea why it's called Glen Shiel, and like I think at the time when I was reviewing it, there doesn't seem to have been very many bottlings of Glen Shiel about, but it's one of those quirks, isn't it? I mean, you know, the whisky industry is full of these things, like, you know, Ruad Moor, for example. Glen Turret never bottle it under that name, they call it peated Glen Turret. And then you've got all the other weird and wonderful names, Wardhead and all that kind of stuff. Just makes the whisky industry a little bit more interesting. And certainly it makes, you know, independent bottlings a little bit more interesting. So anyway, so this is the second half of that first fill bourbon cask, which was distilled in November of 2011. So currently it's still, well, it's actually... Well, yeah, I mean, when the sample was drawn, it was still 10 years old. I mean, obviously now we're going on a bit, it's now actually 11 years old. But when the sample was actually drawn, it was still 10 years old. And like I said, 58.7%. Sample number 2 is a Craigalachy. This is currently 11 years old. It spent the majority of its time in an ex-bourbon cask, and has now spent, or at the time of when the sample was drawn, 5 months in an ex-Arran second fill sherry hoggy. Its bottle, or the current sample, is 63.6%, so that I think should be quite interesting. Number 3 is a Blair Athol. It's a sherry butt. It's spent, well, about 13 years, and it was distilled in 2009 and is currently 57% ABV. And the final sample is the winner, or should we say the one, not necessarily the winner, but, well, it was the winner. It was the one that I chose to put in this bottle here. It was a Stoischer, which is a peated Bunnahabhain, and again, like the Glen Shiel. Another one of those kind of quirky little names. Again, Bunnahabhain don't actually use the term. They obviously, when they bottle their peated spirit, I think it's what's called Tokakadar at the moment, isn't it? But I think they've been given other names, shall we say? And I'm pretty certain that I don't think the distillery has used the name Stoischer. Anyway, so this was distilled in October of 2013, bottled in October of 2013, and bottled in September of this year, thus making it 8 years old. It was a single bourbon cask, 719 bourbon barrel, I think it was. Bourbon barrel, yes, and it was bottled at 58.1%. So yeah, no stinking violet there, shall we say. So anyway, and as you well know, no colouring, no filtration, wouldn't have it, as you can see, lovely colour. So let's delve into my mind and kick off with the Glen Shiel. Okay, so let's see what the Glen Shiel gives us then, shall we? quite a lot of American oak to kick off with. Very creamy, very vanillaed. There's an edginess there, a sort of a dried fruit, slightly column stilly kind of dried fruit note, but some estery, pineapple, orange, barley, grist. There's a graininess there. I mean, it's actually, it's good Loch Lomond. I mean, it's not funky Loch Lomond, shall we say? So it's actually, it's really estery. It's really fruity. I mean, the reason I didn't go for this is basically because it is too similar to the bottling that's already on the market, it's already out there. So there wouldn't have been enough difference. It's a great spirit, and we have still got, or Gauntleys still have stocks of the first part of this cask. And so if that bottle wasn't around, this would have seriously been in the running, I say. Because that's a lovely nose. Yes, you can smell the alcohol. It is really quite pungent, and it's giving me a sort of a little bit of a nose prickle. But it's kind of counterbalancing the first fill bourbon, and although there's a lot of oak there, the alcohol is kind of just stopping it becoming overly dominant. Let's see what the parts are. Very alcoholic, very masked, lots of spicy oak, some gristy barley, some slight pineapple, apricot, touch of rose petal. But wow, that's alcoholic. That's short. That's masked. There is not a lot going on, to be honest with you. That really does need quite a bit of water, I think. So let's see how that opens up the nose. Yeah, that's lovely. It's given it a kind of almost kind of sugar coated, crunchy sugar coating to the fruit. It's quite fragrant, tangerine, apricot. The oak is now sitting back. It's a little bit more behaved. It's giving it an almost kind of custard powdery kind of note. And it's a lovely summery whiskey. I know that we're heading into winter now. So that again was, I suppose, another reason why I didn't opt to go for it. Not only because obviously it's currently available, but it didn't say winter. It says summer to me. Should pass right now. Generous, soft, fruity, mouth-watering, juicy fruits. Less oak again, longer, generous barley finish, a little bit of citrus, a little bit of spice. The oak is still there, but it's just not kind of like overwhelming. It's just vanillaed, and it's all just beautifully harmonious. I think this is, I don't know quite how this is going to sort of carry on maturing. Will the oak drop off a little bit more as it continues to evolve? Will you start to get some more oxidation notes coming in? I think this is going to be really intriguing to see where this goes. And of course, obviously now being a half a cask, the volume of liquid to air means you're going to need to keep your eye on it, because it will sort of oxidise fairly quickly, I think. And yeah, but I mean, even if this was bottled, say, next week or sort of in a couple of weeks' time, I still think it's a beautiful whiskey. So yeah, lovely. Okay, so let's move on to the Craigalackie. So currently 11 years old and 5 months in ex-Aaron second fill sherry hoggies. Definitely alcoholic. I can smell the alcohol. I mean, it's 63.6% for God's sake. It's pretty raw. It's untamed. It's quite malty, but there's a citric note there. There's a touch of sweet barley. there's a, yeah, it's just that undenying rawness of character, and it's really tight. There's not a huge amount of sherry. It's a little bit there, just a faint note, well, maybe a little bit more than a faint note, but there's some touch of dried fruit, but it really hasn't really touched the surface, to be bluntly honest with you. And again, after nosing this, it was just too young. There's too much rawness there and not enough sherry. I mean, bloody hell, I'm saying there's not enough sherry, but I think it's just got some more time to go. Obviously, the sherry butt isn't, or the sherry hoggy, sorry, is second fill, obviously, and it's not that active. It's going to take a bit more time. It's going to take at least another 6 months. I would probably say 18 months before it's added enough sherry notes to sort of give it some sherry character, I guess. Also, that 18 months will allow it to sort of you know, take off a little bit more of the rawness of the spirit. Anyway, let's see what pass on. Alcohol. I mean, I thought the last one was alcoholic. This is, oh, I mean, all I can taste is, well, subtle. Again, this raw spirit is subtle sherry. There's not giving an awful lot at all on the palate. I mean, it's a little bit of spice. All I can taste is sherry, not sherry, alcohol, and it is just pummeled my tongue. And so, again, I mean, it's the thing is with obviously cask strength whiskies, you do get these things. I mean, you know, I've tasted no end of bottlings of cask strength whiskies. You taste it at cask strength, and you know, the alcohol is far too dominant, and that's the wonderful thing about them. You can put a little drop of water with it, and you know, bring the ABV down to, you know, whatever level kind of suits you. And let's see what a little drop of water does with this. Okay, so it's a little sweeter, a little bit more barleyed. To be honest with you, it's not a bad cask of Craiglachie. I mean, Craiglachie, independently bottled Craiglachie, can be very variable. I mean, I've had some lovely bottlings, and I've had some equally not so lovely bottlings, and yet the distillery bottlings are, by and large, pretty good. Again, it kind of gives that credence to the sort of like the whole argument that distilleries sell off stuff that doesn't fit their flavour profile, or maybe doesn't fit their quality criteria. But this, I think, this is not bad. It's still a bit raw, a bit young. Yeah, and I really, the sherry is all pretty much all disappeared. So, yep, I think this is going to need a long time more. Oh, great English that was, wasn't it? More time in the sherry butt, or in the sherry hoggy, I should say. Anyway, let's see what pass on now. It's all right. It's pleasant. It's sweet barley. There's an edge there, a little bit of burnt toffee possibly. Again, it feels raw, no real sherry. Again, a little bit of spice on the finish. It's just not there yet. That's all it boils down to, I think. Give that, like I said, a minimum of 6 months. Look at it again in 6 months. Probably, realistically, I think this is going to need at least a good 18 months, I would have thought. Might even need longer. I mean, that's the point. It's just not picked up enough sherry cask. It's still a bit too raw, and this is the whole thing about whiskey. Just because it's 10 years old or 12 years old doesn't necessarily mean it's ready for drinking. All whiskey is ready for drinking when it's ready for drinking. Sometimes that may well be a long time down the road from that, and I suspect that is just going to need to be a cask that's going to have to be sat on for some time. Not metaphorically, shall we say. Okay, so let's move on to the Blair Athol. So currently 13 years old and 57%. Let's see what the nose gives us. Full, rich, slightly toasty, very lots of sherry character, lots of dried fruit, sub and armagnac-y, dark dried fruit. It's almost a little bit of column still. Of course, obviously, you know, Blair Athol has this really bizarre setup of I forget how many bloody stills they have. They have a multitude of stills that kind of crisscross each other or something weird like that, including, isn't it, the Wee Witchy or something like that. Anyway, so there's an almost kind of column still dried fruit note there as well. So a little bit of sultana as well as raisins and plum and oxidised, almost kind of dark rye-like spices. It's got a lovely intensity. And actually for a sherry cask there is quite a bit of complexity. And you know what, I really was torn by this. You know, it's, you know, you wouldn't expect me to bottle a sherry cask, and this is the thing, you know, it's kind of like always expect the unexpected. Do I go for this and bottle this because nobody would expect me to bottle a sherry cask? In the end, I opted not to. Again, it wasn't about the quality of this. The quality of this is very impressive. And if I was doing sort of more than one bottling, and if we had the pockets deep enough to do so, I would have certainly done this as a second bottling. I think this is really good. I mean, like, as you well know, me and sherry casks, we are not sort of, you know, but this is good. I mean, I'm getting the density of the spirit, and Blair Athol, you know, does sherry really well, and it's really doing it really well, it has to be said. Anyway, let's see what the pal's like. Full, rich, slightly meaty, silky dried fruits, raisins, prune. Again, has that kind of combination of darker dried fruits with almost column stilly kind of lighter dried fruits, sultana, dried apricot, that kind of thing. Again, some almost rye-like spices, some juiciness. I don't think it really needs any water. I mean, it's a lovely tongue-tingling, spicy end to it, and the alcohol is certainly kind of emphasising that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dan actually bottles some of this or all of it in the not too distant future, because it's a lovely whiskey. It's for a sherried whiskey, it's really good. Yeah, okay. So the water doesn't make it fall apart. That's the wrong impression. I didn't mean to give it that kind of impression, but it's not done an awful lot for it. Or it's not done anything. It's not made it better or worse, is what I'm basically trying to say. I mean, it's maybe a little less complex. Possibly, it's a little bit more sort of homogeneous, I guess. But you know, you still get the meatiness of the spirit. You still get the sherried fruit. That's a nice mouthful. I mean, again, you lose some of the intensity. Some of the spices don't seem to be quite there. Still, they're subtler. It's still got a lovely kind of combination of different dried fruits. As again, like I said, the sort of the weight of the spirit. You don't necessarily taste it per se, but you feel it. And yeah, nice finish. A little bit of smoke, a little bit of tobacco smoke on the finish. Good length. I mean, you like sherry cask whiskies, you would love that. And like I said, I really considered this. I thought this was, yeah, I would be happy to sell this because it has complexity. It's not a one-dimensional sherry monster. And I mean, I don't know what this particular bottling would have cost me, I suspect it would have been a lot more than the, it's obviously older, than what the Stoischer cost. And so this, I'm guessing, is probably going to sort of, when it's bottled, I would imagine is going to be mid-80s possibly on the shelf, whereas the Stoischer is 69.95. And I mean, yes, that's more than the Kalila that we had bottled a few years ago, but the price of whiskey has gone up. It's just as simple as that. But I still, and I had to keep that in the back of my mind that, you know, obviously I didn't want it to be too expensive. Yeah, I knew that I was never going to get anything that I could sell at about 50 quid. That was never going to happen, you know. So yeah, so not only was it kind of like, you know, do I like this spirit? Is it ready for bottling? Can I sell it? Is it the right price? I mean, there's so many questions you have to kind of ask yourself, and I'm guessing to a certain extent that the independent bottling companies probably ask themselves the same question. Maybe they have slightly looser criteria sometimes. But you know, that's the way it is, I suppose. So anyway, that's a good Blair apple. Right, okay, so the moment you've all been waiting for, on to the Stoischer. So like I said, 8 years old. Let's see what the nose gives us. Fresh. It really reminds me of old school Kalila. I mean, and that kind of like, I mean, I stuck my nose in it and went, I can sell that. I mean, I can sell that all day long. It's lovely, it's fresh, it's citric, it's white fruits, it's a subtle peatiness. There's a good degree of tarry kind of peat, but it's not a peat monster. There's a touch of rock pools, some salt, some sweet barley. And this is what I like about peated Buna, is that there is a lovely level of complexity. It isn't one-dimensional. Peated Buna is pretty damn good at the end of the day. And I know they've not been doing it for that long. I mean, you know, they claim it was a style of spirit they used to produce, and of course, obviously, as you well know, now they're more well known for unpeated and, you know, monstrously sherried stuff. And yeah, then they released sort of I can't remember what the hell was the first. What was the first bottling? I don't think it was called Tokak. It was called something or other. But anyway, I digress. It's a lovely nose. There's a touch of oak as well. It's got a subtle oakiness, and you know, I like this. It really appealed to me. It, you know, because it's slightly old school Kalila-y kind of, you know, I liked it. But there's some sweetness there as well. Some lovely sweet barley just underpinning it, and you know, it's a good nose. Let's see what it has like. Full, oily barley, earthier peat, dusty, tar, tobacco, creosote, really good intensity, lovely tongue tingling alcohol level, not too intense. It's going to take water fairly well, I think. Oak is quite subtle, very much sitting in the background. It's allowing the spirit to basically do all the talking. Lovely saltiness still, although I imagine this cask has probably spent quite a fair amount of time on the mainland, but it seemed to have retained its coastal character. Good level of peat, nice dusty, earthy kind of peat, not medicinal. So I think it's probably more... I think more people would appreciate it. I mean, the amount of people that basically go, oh, I don't really like the Freud, it's too medicinal, it's too sort of iodine-y and what have you. This is more dustier, earthier kind of peat. It's a bit masked, I'll give it that. It does need some water. Well, I know, I've already tasted it, so I know it takes water particularly well, but yeah, I'll just humour me on this one, will you? sweeter, slightly sweeter. It's got a little bit more barley character now. There's the peat is dropping off a bit, as they often have a tendency to do so when you put water with it, but it's not disappeared in its entirety. There's a touch of lemon. It's showing up its youth. I mean, I kind of wrestled with this because I would love to see this with maybe another year, maybe two on it under its belt. I mean, again, it was such a battle between this and the Blair Athol, and it's kind of each one had its merits at the end of the day, and each one had its there was a plus and a minus to each, I think. And the minus to this one, and I will be bluntly honest with you guys, is that it really is just that little bit away from being à point, as the French would say. But as it comes down to the fact, would I back this? Would I put my name to this? Would I sell this? Would I enjoy this? And of course, at the end of the day, the answer is absolutely yes. And that is why I kind of stuck it in the bottle, and that's why I really hope that you guys will buy it, because it's a bloody good whiskey at the end of the day, and I need to sell the damn stuff. There's only 108 bottles. It's a slightly smaller run than the Kalila, and I will be honest and say that we have sold quite a number so far. I received this earlier this week. I pre-sold some bottles, and I would guess we're probably in a week. We've probably sold, I would say, somewhere in the region of 24 to 20, 26, 28 kind of bottles. So there's still a fair few bottles, but bear in mind that the Whisky Festival is only a month away, and that will really mean that once people get to taste it and they'll be able to buy it on the day, it will sell, just like the last one. I have no doubt about that. Anyway, let's see what passes on. That's nice. Sweeter barley character on the palate now. Touch of lemon, less peat. It's still earthy, still dry. A little bit of tar still there. It's retained that, although it's now dialed it down a little bit. The alcohol obviously is dialed down as well. It's a lot longer. It's easier on the palate. There's some charred oak kind of coming through on the finish now. A little bit of more vanilla, it's showing a little bit more oak, but it's still really balanced. It's not like the peat is completely, slunked off, as I often use. This is a term I often use when you stick water with it. It's still got a good level of peatiness, lovely length. I mean, I still think that, maybe another year or so in the cask, but you know what, it's kind of horses for courses. I think right here and now, it's drinking really, really well. So I don't kind of have any issue with bottling it right now. And the nice thing about this is there's still half a cask of it going. You never know, might end up bottling that second half of the cask next year. That would be interesting. That would mean, you really ought to buy a bottle of, you ought to buy 2 bottles of this actually, because you need to buy a bottle of this to drink now because it's lovely, and you need to buy a second bottle to basically hold on to it just in case, we bottle the second half of the cask next year, and then you can actually, you can taste along, you can sort of, you can try and see if it has actually evolved and gone any further than that. So, yeah. Anyway, better sum today's episode of the show up. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Firstly, a big thank you to Dan Hipson from Sitting Shed for all his help and everything that we went through in getting this bottling out to market. Like I said, the Glen Shiel, I think, is an absolutely lovely whiskey. It's a gorgeous whiskey, but it's still available, and it's too similar to what's available, and so that's the reason I kind of passed up on that. The Craigellachie, as I said, don't think it's quite ready yet. another sort of 6 to 18 months, and I think that will be where I would look to see about bottling that particular whisky. Blair Athol, like I said, lovely sherry Blair Athol. You know, I mean, yeah, I do like sherry from time to time, but it has to be balanced, and it has to have, you know, nuance, and that had nuance. Bottle it now, be more than happy with it. A couple of years, I'm sure that would still be pretty damn good. And the Stoischer. Do I need to say any more apart from it's bloody good? You really should buy it. It's not going to blow you away. It's not the best peated malt you've ever had in your entire life. It's certainly, well, it might be. It ranks actually. I mean, because there's not that much in the way of Stoischer that I've tasted. And I think it certainly ranks up there with the other Stoischer bottlings that I've tasted. But you know, if somebody come along and say it's the greatest peated Buna I've ever tasted in my entire life, again, I would take that with a pinch of salt. But it's bloody good. It's bloody drinkable. And like I said, you better buy a couple of bottles, because you never know. I might bottle the second half of this cask next year. Anyway. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the show. Sorry about the cloak and dagger to start off with, but you know, one has to keep one's secrets at the end of the day, and everything was, you know, unfolded as the episode went along. So anyway, all that's left to say is I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the show. I really hope you purchase a bottle of this, because it means an awful lot to me if you do. I hope you say nice things about it. I mean, if you don't like it, just say so. I don't really care. I mean, well, I do care, but you know, I'm big enough to accept a bit of criticism from time to time. But honestly, you know, like I said, I wouldn't have put my name to it if I didn't think it was worth actually drinking. So, and I showed it at this month's whiskey tasting event, and it went down really well. And like I said, if you want to try before you buy a ticket for the Nottingham Whisky Festival, 19th of November, 50 quid a ticket, gets you entry. Loads of people will be there. I haven't got a bloody clue who's exhibiting, apart from obviously we'll be there. I know Henston Distillery will be there, Angus Dundee will be there, but that's all I know. But there'll be a lot of interesting whiskey, and you know, you will not be disappointed. So, and you get to drink whiskey in a church. What more could you want at the end of the day? Drinking whiskey in a church in the afternoon. Need I say any more? Good afternoon and good dramming.